Now this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down. And I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel-air.
So to give you the smallest overview of what the Fresh Prince of Bel-air show is it was a sitcom that ran in the 90s, went for 6 years, and it was pretty much just focusing on Will Smith as a teenage African American who grew up in Philadelphia and moved to Bel-air with his auntie, uncle, and cousins, and they were called the Banks family. What stereotypes are shown in the Fresh Prince of Bel-air? The Fresh Prince of Bel-air shows the stereotypical African American teen in the 90s. This is played through Will Smith. This is achieved through Will Smith not growing up with nearly as much wealth as the rest of the Banks family. Will Smith is a bit of an athlete. Also, he's really popular with the ladies and has a very loud, extroverted personality, and there's a little bit of a joker. As much as Will Smith is the stereotypical African American teen in those times, there are also a bunch of other black narratives shown within the story. This can be seen through his Uncle Phil, who is an African American man who is wealthy, a family orientated man, and is also a lawyer. Then you have Vivian, who's an African American woman, and she's pretty wealthy, and she also has a very different personality to all of the other characters. Throughout the whole Banks family, you basically see different narrative stories of African Americans that isn't necessarily shown in other shows in those times. So this show is actually really funny, especially in my opinion. It's a comedic show, it's very lighthearted, but there are some episodes that do explore some more deep and important issues. For example, episode Granny Gets Busy, which is an episode that is in season 2, episode 5, was ahead of its time with challenging gender roles. So I'm going to show you the scene just in a sec. But basically, Will and Carlton at the beginning of the episode are having an argument with Hillary and Ashley, where Will and Carlton are saying that a man can do a so-called man's job and a so-called women's job, but a woman can't do a so-called man's job. And then Hillary and Ashley are arguing the exact opposite thing. So they give each other the task of, well, Will Smith and Carlton have to create a dress while Hillary and Ashley have to put together an exercise bike.
Handlebars. Pedals. Hey, we're doing great. Gimme. Oh, tools needed. Pliers and a wrench with a ratchet head. Sounds like somebody with a bad haircut. What else? Oh, goody. Listen to this. Do not overexert yourself or work to exhaustion. We have to stop, Ashley.
Carl, man. Now, is this the saddest sight that you've seen, man? Other than your girlfriend in biker shorts?
We are doing just fine, thank you. As a matter of fact, as soon as we put it together, we'll be done.
When did you see my girlfriend in bicycle shorts? Lost.
Basically, by the end of the episode, they both do it successfully, showing that a woman can do a so-called man's job and a man can do a so-called woman's job. So Carlton and Will are really impressed with Ashley and Hillary with how they could actually put together an exercise bike really well, and Ashley and Hillary were really impressed with Will and Carlton because they actually did an amazing job at putting together or sewing a dress. So why is this show so popular? The reason that I love this show is because I think it's funny. I think it's hilarious. I think it's interesting. I love the storylines. But on a more deeper level, I really related to Will as he feels like a bit of a fish out of water. He really stands out in the new family that he's in with the Banks. And I felt very similar when I moved up to the city of Canberra from a small town. I felt like a fish out of water too. I felt like I was very different, like I was very loud. And watching Will Smith kind of excel and actually really grow into his family inspired me to really grow into this big city that I was in. I just really found comfort in Will and seeing that he was going through a similar thing that I was going through when I moved to Canberra, as he was completely different when he started living with the Banks family. Now, why does everybody else love this show? Well, Daphne Maxwell, who played Vivian Banks, a lead role in the show, was asked why the show was still popular in today's pop culture.
And she replied with, "It's really hard to recapture the context of the original show because it had to do with what people were feeling at that time. A lot of themes and stories of the show were universal stories that will live on and have lived on for 30 years already. They were about family, and they were about fish out of water, and how so many disparate people with different ways of living, all the different family members had a different way of looking at life, and how they all got together to solve a problem or to move forward towards something. And it's interesting to see it's all played out with all the different viewpoints to one end. And I think that's what makes the show so iconic, is that it is such a universal theme show."
So, The Fresh Prince of Bel-air was a sitcom that was filmed in the 90s. So as you can imagine, the cinematography was fairly basic. There were two main angles that are shown in the entire show. And that's basically the wide angle that is shown in the living room and the wide angle that is shown in the kitchen. Of course, there are many other angles that are shown within the series, but they are the two main angles that we see in pretty much every single episode. The mise-en-scene, the set design, the costumes in the show, they were also fairly simple. Basically, the director was just showing that the Banks family was wealthy, having a large mansion, a large living room, a nice clean looking kitchen. Including in the mise-en-scene, the Banks family generally used English that was formal. Unlike Will Smith, who would generally use ebonics/slang. This basically just separated the classes, showing that Will came from a different place where they used ebonics and more slang, whilst the others grew up in a more wealthy environment. The costume idea was simple, but it worked very effectively. Will Smith would wear things that were trending in the hip-hop culture back then. He would wear really bright clothes. Sometimes he would wear clothes inside out, back to front. He would just try to make it look cool, make it look different or unique. Whilst the Banks family generally wore more formal types of clothing, things that made them look more upper class, very wealthy. Besides Ashley. Ashley is the youngest Banks member of the family until her brother is born in the next few seasons. Basically, Ashley thinks that Will Smith is cool and like he's an older brother. And she wanted to be like him, so you can kind of see how she can dress formally, but she also does take a bit of style from Will in the way that she dresses as well. How do we see character revelation in The Fresh Prince of Bel-air? Of course, throughout the seasons, I see personally that all of the characters have revelation. But I'm just gonna mainly focus on Will Smith today. Even from the very first episode, Will Smith has revelation in the way that he talks to his uncle around being black. In almost every episode of the series, there is a lesson for Will to learn, and therefore Will grows. But there is one episode and one scene that stands out from the rest. In the episode, Papa's Got a Brand New Excuse, we see that Will's real dad, who left him as a child, comes back and wants to take him on a trip, but then at the last second pulls out. Of course, Will Smith is devastated that his father, that he was happy to be united with, is once again ditching him. As soon as his dad leaves, we see a monologue from Will where he's angry, sad, and we see this new mature side of Will Smith.
Daddy-o! What's up?
Will, I'm glad you're here. Some business came up I gotta handle. So we're gonna have to put our trip on hold. You understand?
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool.
Just for a couple of weeks.
I understand.
Yeah. Maybe a little longer.
Yeah, whatever.
Look, I'll call you next week and we'll iron out the details. Okay?
Yeah.
It was great seeing you, son.
You too, Lou.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Will.
You know what? Actually, this works out better for me. You know, the Slimmies of summer come to class wearing next to nothing. You know what I'm
Will,
saying?
it's all right to be angry.
Hey, why should I be mad? I'm saying at least he said goodbye this time. I just wish I hadn't wasted my money buying this stupid present.
I'm sorry. If there was something that I
Hey,
could
you know
do-
what? You ain't got to do nothing, Uncle Phil. Hey, ain't like I'm still 5 years old, you know? Ain't like I'm gonna be sitting up every night asking my mom, when's Daddy coming home, you know? Who needs him? Hey, he wasn't there to teach me how to shoot my first basket, but I learned, didn't I? Hey, I got pretty damn good at it too, didn't I,
Yeah,
Uncle Phil?
you did.
Got through my first date without him, right? I learned how to drive, I learned how to shave, I learned how to fight without him. I had 14 great birthdays without him. He never even sent me a damn card. To hell with him! I ain't need him then and I don't need him now.
Will.
Nah, you know what, Uncle Phil? I'm gonna get through college without him. I'm gonna get a great job without him. I'm gonna marry me a beautiful honey, and I'm gonna have me a whole bunch of kids. I'm gonna be a better father than he ever was. And I sure as hell don't need him for that, because ain't a damn thing he could ever teach me about how to love my kids. How come he don't want me, man?
This scene was a bit of a tearjerker, especially for me and the rest of the audience watching the show. But luckily he's got his Uncle Phil, who is there to support him and act as a father figure. Thank you so much for watching my vlogcast. Today we talked about the Fresh Prince of Bel-air, and we talked about things that the show portrays. We talked about the mise-en-scene, the cinematography, the character revelation, and a little bit more. So thank you so much for listening. There was so much to talk about with this show, but that's all we have for today. My name is Ethan Hart. Thank you for listening.